What is up, everyone? This is Namranan once again, and I will be talking about Urshifu and Single Strike and Rapid Strike form. So, without further ado, let's go on to talking about these very interesting Pokemon. So, obviously, if you play OU, you already know Urshifu Dark, pretty broken. Single Strike, Wicked Blow, Unseen Fist, can't protect any of its actually good moves. It's pretty tough, especially in OU. Despite having Clefable, who's pretty much one of the best checks you'll ever get to it, and also Galarian Weezing, it still has a lot of coverage options, and obviously it's just really unhealthy for the metagame, because if you're forced to run a Fairy type, that's kind of not cool. Especially if you can't run, especially since it ruins the way you usually play the game, which is with Protect and stuff. So yeah, getting rid of Urshifu was fine for OU. Now, you may be wondering, well, Namranan, why is this form banned, but not the other form, who arguably has a better offensive typing, because after all, this is Keldio's offensive typing, and we all know how good Keldeo was. Keyword on was, and you'll realize why this isn't as good. But that's one of the many reasons. Another reason why this mod just isn't as good as Urshifu Rapid Strike, Urshifu Single Strike, is mainly because of its signature move. You may be wondering, but a multi-hitting move surely it's better than the normal Wicked Blow. Surely Surging Strikes is a lot stronger because it has technically the same amount of base power, but it hits 3 times. So surely it's great, right? Not quite. And here's why. So the problem with Surging Strikes is that, first of all, you have 8 BP on a multi-hit move. Second of all, even though it's always going to be a critical hit, it's a physical contact move, which means you're basically running the risk of Pokemon like Ferrothorn basically screwing you over, as well as random Rocky Helmet Pokemon, which are extremely common in OU. And I'm not just going to talk about just OU. Obviously, my main metagame is a Monotype, but since I'm talking about the Pokemon in general, I'll be referring to OU and Monotype. But obviously, I'll talk about Monotype later. But yeah, Urshifu-S in OU is incredibly... I wouldn't even say it's bad. It's not bad, it's just not as good as Urshifu Single Strike, for obvious reasons. Now, design-wise, I actually quite like how Game Freak handled these two Pokemon, because as you guys know, fighting-type Pokemon are my favorite types of Pokemon, and I would just love I love it when Game Freak makes new fighting types, because for some reason, lately, they have just been making either absolutely broken fighting types, or they've been making really awful fighting types. And unfortunately, it seems like that trend has continued, for the lack of a better term. But Urshifu Rapid Strike seems to be the one Pokemon that doesn't seem to be over the edge, which is good, but it's literally just a physical version of Keldeo, which honestly isn't super unique, but it's still not a bad Pokemon, I would say, design-wise. Moveset-wise, not like actually physical design-wise. I mean like how it works in the game design-wise, not how it looks. Because I know some people don't like this design, so I'm not going to say anything about it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Single Strike, and then I'll talk about the broken one afterwards. So obviously we have some okay coverage moves here. We got the Close Combat, Liquidation, which you'll never use, Poison Jab, all the other coverage moves that you probably see on Urshifu-S, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, Rock Slide. Also has Scald for whatever godforsaken reason, and also U-Turn is a pretty important thing. Now you may be thinking, oh, well, no duh, it's got U-Turn. It's a slightly decently fast Pokemon that can revenge kill. Of course it has U-Turn. Clearly, you aren't as well versed in fighting types. Not to throw shade at you for not knowing that, because obviously, who would think that fighting types are like some of the most shafted Pokemon when it comes to Pokemon that have like switch out moves, offensive switch out moves. Well, let me tell you something. So, let me do a little filter check real quick here. So we're going to go into types. Well, actually, no. First, we're going to go into... Actually, no, we'll just do types first. So first, we're going to filter that. Unfortunately, I can't filter moves specifically, but I think it should be pretty clear which mons get U-turn here. So the bug fighting types don't have U-turn, except for Pheromosa, but that mon's broken. We're not talking about it. Hawlucha, I believe, actually does have U-turn, but it can't use it effectively because it's so pitifully weak, and it can't afford to run a choice set that would actually take advantage of it relatively well. You also have Urshifu Rapid Strike, who we're talking about right now, and Zapdos Galar, who's a mod we'll save for another video. And also Buzzwole, but yeah, Buzzwole doesn't have U-turn. Blaziken also got U-turn. I believe it actually got U-turn this generation, I believe. Which is pretty nice, but it pretty much never uses it, unfortunately. Obviously, all these fighting type Pokemon are inviable. We're not talking about them, except for you. We'll talk about you later. But Conkeldurr doesn't have it. Keldeo doesn't have it. Keldeo has Flip Turn now, but it didn't have it before. Kobo doesn't have anything. Terrakion doesn't have anything. Cobalion doesn't have anything. Heracross doesn't have U-turn. Lucario doesn't have anything. Bewear doesn't have anything. Yanchao is one of the few Pokemon that actually has U-turn, besides the new Gen 8 mons. Pangoro has Parting Shot. Machamp doesn't have anything. Sirfetch'd, I believe, doesn't have anything. I don't think this mon has U-turn. I might be wrong, though. I'll check, unless you know in the description. Hitmonlee doesn't have anything. Hitmontop doesn't have anything. Passimian is also one of the few Pokemon that actually has U-turn. And Virizion doesn't have anything. We don't need to talk about these guys because they're all garbage. But just know that they also don't have anything, except for Silvally Fighting, but that's not viable to talk about in this discussion, at least. But yeah. A common trend you'll notice is that most of those Pokemon do not have U-turn at all. And for a fighting type Pokemon to have U-turn is incredibly good, because obviously U-turn is one of the better moves in the game, because it does offensive pressure, both offensive pressure, and also gives you utility in getting the Pokemon out of a bad situation, while keeping offensive momentum up. Now, fighting types usually don't do this, possibly for a few reasons. Now, I don't know the mentality behind Game Freak, and I'm not going to say that I know exactly what the reasoning is, but here are a few hypotheses I have. One is that fighting types usually aren't the type to like run away from a battle. They usually like to stay in. So them pivoting, I guess, wouldn't be like normal as like a lore-based thing, I guess, maybe, but it still seems kind of nonsense, especially since some of the most powerful fighting type Pokemon have U-turn, so it doesn't make sense to me, but I guess that might be one of the reasons. Another hypothesis is that generally fighting type Pokemon are just designed to be not Scarfers. It's like I feel like Game Freak's perception of fighting types, because obviously Game Freak has like a lot of biases towards certain types. Like they keep thinking that ice types are supposed to be great defensively, even though they're not. They keep thinking they keep giving water types and steel types typically don't have recovery moves, besides the opposite exceptions, but yeah, it's literally the same thing with fighting types. Like, Milotic is obviously an exception for most water types. Wish doesn't really count as consistent recovery, and the Slow Twins are obviously also exceptions, but most water types usually don't have a recovery move. Same goes for steel types, besides the obvious exceptions like Corviknight and Skarmory, because they're flying types. But yeah. It's just might be one of those type biases that they have, that they just don't like doing this certain move. Why U-turn, though, I have no idea. I can't really tell you why. Game Freak just doesn't give fighting type Pokemon U-turn, but it's very clear that they don't. And they didn't really start doing it until now, with these two new Pokemon, and also Blaziken's buff, as you all know. So, yeah, it's kind of weird how not having U-turn on a fighting type is like this, but yeah. Anyway, sorry for that long, very, very long tangent about U-turn on fighting types, but the reason why this is so good on Urshifu, especially in mono type, is because it allows us to get in and out of battle really quick and effectively become a Scarfer, and basically keep in check like really fast Dark type Pokemon, namely like Hydreigon, and other like powerful Dark types, as well as Steel types. So having U-turn is incredibly good, and yeah, I'm pretty sure this thing runs a few sets in OU. It runs like a Scarfer set, a Band set, and I'm pretty sure it also runs a Protective Pad set as well, just to avoid Rocky Helmet damage, which is a good niche, but you shouldn't have to run that on an offensive Pokemon in the first place. Kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Anyway, besides that, not really much else I can say about Urshifu Single Strike, without going into Monotype. And yeah, obviously we won't talk about Urshifu, I just said Single Strike, didn't I? Urshifu Rapid Strike, but same thing applies to Urshifu's Single Strike. We don't really have much to talk about because everyone basically already knows what this guy does. And design-wise, the only things I could really note design-wise I really like about him is only really relevant to Monotype because you pretty much don't really care about it in OU. So without further ado, let's talk about this in regards to Monotype. So Urshifu Rapid Strike obviously is worse than Urshifu Single Strike. Technically, it is worse if we were talking about it on a viability scale. Now, that may sound crazy to you because obviously you see it on every single water team you face on ladder, but the fact of the matter is this Pokemon is just really, it only works well on water with the team support that water has, because offensively on its own, as you can clearly see by how it's used in OU, it's not that great. And Keldeo, in general, just does its typing and its offensive pressure way better. It's faster. It actually hits both ends of the spectrum, so you don't even need to be a physical... It doesn't even need to be a physical attacker. And aside from that, Keldeo can also use leftovers and not have to use protective pads to avoid getting random chip damage. It can run Substitute, Calm Mind, all sorts of sets, and actually be able to pull them off because it's so good offensively already, and it doesn't have to worry about unnecessary things besides missing a Hydro Pump maybe. And you don't even have to like worry about that because you could just run Surf or Scald or even Aura Sphere. In general, Keldeo is just a lot better than this mod on fighting teams. On water teams, it's better than Keldeo though, because obviously its portfolio is a little bit better because obviously remember what I said about Keldeo being a little bit inconsistent. This Pokemon is far more consistent than Keldeo and also has Surging Strikes, which is obviously an incredibly good move. It can literally shut down certain leads like instantly. Like if you were like a bug team or something that had lead Galvantula, your lead just got completely ruined because Surging Strikes just destroys the Pokemon if it's Scarf, which is incredibly bad for you. So yeah. If it's a band set, it obviously does like a lot of damage to like the general steel type cores. Like it takes down Celesteela, and this bond single-handedly forced steel teams to start running Skarmory instead of Celesteela because Skarmory is better physically defensively than Celesteela, as we talked about in our previous video. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how this mon has transformed, sorry, I'm messing up my words, but it's pretty interesting how this mon just works better on one type, but doesn't work as effectively on the other type, just because of its teammates. It's very, very intriguing, and I feel like I would go in more in depth about it, but I would have to make an entirely new video about that in order to actually cover that in detail. So, for the sake of time in this video, I'll just say that Urshifu Single Strike works better on a team that can take advantage of its wall-breaking powers, but on its own offensively, it's not that great. So on an HO type like fighting, where it doesn't really have support, it can't really do that well, and that is why it is not used on fighting as much. Now, that can change. We can find a new use for it. I might find a new use for it. Anyone could find a new use for it. But as of this video, it currently is just not that great on fighting, and it doesn't even have a niche, because that would mean not using Urshifu single strike because of species clause. And yeah, you're about to hear why fighting type teams wouldn't exactly do that. So, Urshifu single strike. This mon is incredibly good, especially in monotype. Obviously it got banned to Ubers from OU, so I won't talk about it in OU that much, but basically it pretty much does the same thing it does in mono. It just spams Wicked Blow, spams its close combat, has choice ban, can use bulk up. It's literally just the same thing. It's so good. Now, you might be thinking, well, Namranan, why is this Pokemon so good? Aren't there other fighting dark type Pokemon? You're right. There are other fighting dark type Pokemon. In fact, one of them, Scrafty, was incredibly good in its debut generation. Hang on a second. I have to make sure I can. Oh, no. Okay. But yeah, Scrafty here was incredibly good in Gen 5 because of its typing. It was able to just completely blank a lot of Pokemon, a lot of Psychic type Pokemon. Then Gen 6 happened, and then Fairy types were added, and then Psychic types also got Fairy type moves. Scrafty no longer could keep up at that point. It went from being one of the best Pokemon fighting had to one of the worst. All with one generational change and one typing being changed. Clefable shuts it down completely. Azumarill resists its stabs, so now it can't even kill that thing. Just a lot of bad things happen for this mod. A lot of bad things. And the only buff it would get would be the Prankster buff, but that's basically irrelevant anyway because it has Shed Skin, so it pretty much didn't care anyway. So yeah, Scrafty got the shaft in Gen 6 and 7. And there was hope with Pangoro to eventually take over once it got added in Gen 6. But just like Scrafty, it will suffer from the same issues. Problem with Pangoro and Scrafty, besides them being obviously incredibly slow and not really, and having well, they don't even have bad coverage. Their coverage is actually pretty good, and their abilities also aren't that bad. Just why are they so mediocre and bad? And the main reason is one key thing that dark types have: Sucker Punch. You have two incredibly slow Pokemon that are very powerful, but you don't give either of them a Sucker Punch. Why? They're both fighting types, they're both dark types. Why in the world do they not have Sucker Punch? Because Pangoro with Sucker Punch, while it might not be meta-defining, it's definitely a little bit better than what it is right now. And it probably would have had a niche last gen, because Psychic Terrain didn't exist last gen because Lele was banned. So it really could have had a niche last gen if it had Sucker Punch, but they didn't give it to him. I don't remember. I think this thing always had close combat if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, by the way. But yeah, this mod also got a crazy amount of buffs. A lot of fighting types got a lot of buffs, but we're going to talk about what really made me mad in a future video about the changes to fighting types. But yeah, Scrafty, same thing. It just can't keep up, and without Sucker Punch making up for its low speed, and it can't even pull off like a good bulk up rest set without Sucker Punch or something like that. It's just so sad. It's so sad how both these Pokemon are just shafted completely by not having Sucker Punch. Enter Urshifu. This Pokemon has Sucker Punch. If I can scroll to it. Come on now. But yes, this Pokemon has Sucker Punch. And Sucker Punch is incredibly good. Like, incredibly good. Especially for fighting type, because now on fighting teams, and not even just on fighting teams, even in OU, this is an incredibly valuable skill, because now you have a fighting type that isn't scared by psychic types at all, and can actually punish the faster ones like the Latios, or Latias. Excuse me. But having Sucker Punch helped immensely with dealing with these Pokemon. And it's just, it didn't really dawn on me that this Pokemon would be good, because when this Pokemon was first announced, I thought it was going to be mediocre or even bad. Because of its 322 speed, I was just like, it's just another not fast enough dark fighting type Pokemon that's going to get absolutely destroyed by fairies, and it's going to be too weak to do anything. But then it got Sucker Punch. Also, I didn't know what Unseen Fist did at the time, but when I figured it out, I was just like, oh, well, that's something. But Sucker Punch is the real seller here. Because now, no longer is it like its brethren Pangoro and Scrafty, where it has to worry about getting outsped and revenge killed by psychic types, like Latios or anything like that. Now, it can threaten faster Pokemon, frailer Pokemon, with its meaty attack stat, and threaten them. Threaten them with Unseen Fist, because now they can't protect, because if they protect, they risk getting hit by Wicked Blow. And that is actually incredibly strong for a Pokemon like this. And I cannot believe it took Game Freak this long to actually make a proper fighting type Pokemon. Now, obviously, it got banned. Unfortunately, I was really sad when this thing got banned from OU. It's not banned in Monotype though, and that's where I'm currently using it. And it's still incredibly good at doing all the things I just mentioned. It's very good at beating Psychic types. It still struggles a lot against Fairies, even though it has Poison Jab and Iron Head, but Pangoro also had that, but guess what Pangoro wasn't? Pangoro wasn't fast. Pangoro is incredibly slow. It is a base 58. That's so bad. And despite it being very bad, Urshifu can at least outspeed some of these fairy types. Like, for example, Tapu Fini. It can outspeed that with its 322 speed. It just surprises me how it took this long for Game Freak to actually make a proper fighting type Pokemon. But unfortunately, it's a little too overtuned. The only balanced one is Urshifu-S, obviously. But obviously that Pokemon has its own issues. But it's not bad. And I think I should be happy that that Pokemon isn't incredibly broken. But it was broken in Monotype before the DLC. Then it got unbanned, and now it's actually in a somewhat decent spot, now that every other type has more answers to it. And also because the metagame developed further, so there's that too. But yeah. I think there's like a little bit left I have to go about Urshifu. Dark. But yeah, just basically Sucker Punch was the main thing selling this thing. And also Unseen Fist. Unseen Fist is very huge for a fighting type Pokemon, because now that was actually another thing that's really big. Fighting type Pokemon struggled a lot against Protect, especially since they couldn't even use U-turn, and their literal stab move is almost always Contact or something like that. They're either always taking chip damage, or they're basically getting their moves read and they have to constantly switch out all the time. It was incredibly annoying, and that's why fighting types need U-turn, in my opinion at least. But this mod just flipped that concept on its head. Now, Protect doesn't do anything. It just breaks right through it. And this isn't the first time that Game Freak has introduced, like, Protect breaking moves, per se. It's just the first time they've made it an ability. And in almost any ability, this ability is broken, as far as I'm aware, so yeah, it's kinda insane how good not being able to destroy Protect is. Because now, if you have a Toxapex in front of you, that thing is basically forced to recover every single time. It can't even afford to haze if you're like a bulk upset or something like that. They can't afford to do that, because now they have to worry about getting destroyed by Wicked Blow, and they're forced to recover at least once. So they basically can't haze, and they can't Protect and stall you out. They just can't. They have to make a hard play there, which is incredibly good, because that's what a fighting type Pokemon should be doing, at least in my opinion. They should be just constantly making you make a quick decision and you shouldn't be able to just choose a brain dead option, like a Protect, for example. But I do realize Protect is incredibly important to keep these Pokemon in check. But it's nice to see at least a few fighting types be able to break that rule. And I'm glad Urshifu is one of them, which is why it's one of my favorite mons right now to use. But yeah, Unseen Fist is incredibly good, and obviously the rest of its coverage is pretty good as well. I really just like how Urshifu and Urshifu-S were handled. The mons themselves are incredibly fun to use, and they're incredibly unique in this kind of fighting type metagame, because they're not just, well, they are kind of still a lot of the same, because a lot of fighting types are just like revenge killers. Yeah, that's typically what they are. They're just usually scarfed revenge killers, and it's nice to see a different take on it, because even though the Conkeldurr before DLC was a pretty popular pick, and some people were even calling for that mod to get banned, which is crazy to me, but yeah, Conkeldurr was one of the few takes on fighting types that I also really liked. Just a fat, bulky, hard hitting Pokemon. Very unique take, and I like how Urshifu can also be like a bulk up setup set. You don't really see that very often with physical fighting types, at least. Never see the move bulk up getting used that much, regardless. But it's nice to see it on Urshifu. But yeah, I think that's all I want to talk about with these two Pokemon. So if you guys enjoyed that little rant, feel free to subscribe. Let me know if you want me to do a specific Pokemon next in the comments. I can talk about it a lot, because trust me, every single Pokemon has something I want to talk about. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and once again, stay good.